Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen and welcome back. In today's video, I have 3 different ideas for you to do shaker cards. Shaker cards are a ton of fun to make. They are beautiful with snowflake stamps especially. And for today's projects, I'm going to be using parts of the Gina Designs release and the brand new Holiday Cheer card kit. Now in the card kit, you're getting 2 large 6x8 stamps plus coordinating dies, and there's also this free gift, the Winter Wonderland die set, which I will be playing with very soon. Now a couple things I wanted to show you real quick in this release because it's a big one. There is a new Master Layouts die set. Now I keep mine on an 8x10 magnet sheet. It has this window panel. There's also kind of these scalloped frames and these straight edge frames that fit inside of it. There is also some shaker dies. So we have an oval shaker and the circle shaker. You can see there is a Santa silhouette and then ornament toppers. Now, some of these are completely separate, but I keep mine all on the same magnet sheet since they're all pretty similar. Here's a look at that stitched frame that you can use to create your shaker, and that is what I'm going to be using today for my cards. There is also these ornament toppers, so you can put them on top of your circle, or your ovals on either side would make a great ornament. We also have some new embossing folders. So this one is the Snowflakes background that I happen to have already done on white cardstock. There's the Gingham embossing folder. We have falling leaves, great for your fall cards. And then we have one more here, and this one is the Holiday Flora. This one's got kind of some poinsettias, holly leaves, pine cones. Now, a closer look at some of the stamps in the kit. This is the Blizzard stamp set, and Gina makes some of the most amazing snowflake stamp sets. And then there's this one in the kit. This is a very silly season, and I will be using that cute little gnome down in the bottom corner. So I'm going to get to work on my shaker cards, starting with this one that is starting with the sea glass cardstock, I believe it is, and some Tranquil Teal ink. And I had that die there. Now that one is from the Circle Shaker die set. It is just the plain circle. And I kind of used it as a guide. I want to keep the center of my cardstock kind of that light color, and then I'm adding the dark color around it. The ink blending does not have to be perfect because we're really going to be covering it up with some sequins, but I just kind of want to blend it in towards the center so that the darker or the edges around that circle are going to be darker, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. So now I took that circle and I die cut it from white cardstock right out of the center, so it's going to create the window of my card. Now I have a piece of heat resistant acetate in my Misty tool, and I'm prepping this large snowflake with my hand. I want to make sure it is really conditioned to get the best impression possible. And my heat resistant acetate, I am prepping with my anti-static powder tool. And then I'm inking up that snowflake with white pigment ink. I'm trying to get the best impression I can out of this on the first go, because acetate, I honestly have always struggled doing heat embossing on acetate. So I'm trying to hit all the dots on this one. So I stamped that down. It really did stamp perfectly. You do want to be careful not to squish the snowflake because there are some really delicate areas on it. Now I'm sprinkling on white detail embossing powder. I'm going to tap off that excess, and you're going to notice there's a ton of embossing powder on there, but just give it a couple of really good flicks to the back. That should get all of it off. And then you want your heat tool really, really nice and hot. I am just coming in real quick, melting, moving away from it to try and minimize warping as much as I can. So I wiped away any of the excess anti-static powder from that with a Swiffer cloth, and then I'm lining the back of this window piece that I die cut with some double-sided tape. I want to make sure I get my acetate attached first. So after I remove the backing, I'm going to go ahead and place this over that acetate. Now I will admit that I did have some warping on that acetate a little bit, so still something I need to practice on, but I placed this down over that acetate and secured it with that double-sided tape. Now to create the shaker panel for this, I am taking some foam tape and I doubled it up, and then I'm trimming it down into thin strips. I removed the backing on both sides, and that's going to allow me to curve this around the window there. Now I'm going to show you an easier way to create a shaker. It's just a little bit more time consuming. So you can kind of pick and choose which way you want to make a shaker. Now I didn't luck out. It didn't go all the way around, so I had to trim off another piece. You want to make sure that all of your foam is completely connected for your shaker panel. Then I filled in the rest of the back of that window card with the foam tape, still doubled up. I prepped that window with the anti-static powder again, and now I'm adding in just some different sequins that Gina has. The disco ball one here is perfect for it. After I put that in the shaker window, I'm going to bring in my blended panel and line that up as best as I can and just push that down to secure it on top of that foam. So now we have a completed shaker card. So this is one way, and actually kind of my normal way to make a shaker card. Now you can leave it as is, or you can die cut out one of those ornament toppers from Gina's silver cardstock and add that to the top. So you can leave it, like I said, as is, or make it into an ornament. Either one is great because shaker cards are fun no matter what. Now I had planned on stamping a sentiment and trimming it down, but I decided instead to just stamp right on the front of the card. So I finished that off screen to complete my shaker window. Now for my second card that I'm going to create, I am using a few different colors of Gina K Designs cardstock. I don't know them all offhand right now, but I will have everything listed down below in the video description. And I'm taking this die that is going to cut them into strips. I like using this when I'm going to put strips on my card because it ensures that everything is perfectly cut straight. And I also really like kind of that beveled edge that it leaves on all the cardstock. So I'm just going here on a piece of white cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm adding tape runner to the back of each of these strips and I'm laying them down onto that cardstock. To be honest, my initial plan was to put a bunch of strips on here and die cut it with the circle die, but I kind of changed my mind as I went along because I really liked how these strips looked on the front of the cardstock. So I filled up this panel just enough so that it's going to kind of cover the circle die. And then I'm going to bring this over to my paper trimmer and trim off any of that excess that's overhanging on the edge. I'm going to attempt to do some more heat embossing on acetate. So I have that acetate in my Misty tool, prepped with my anti-static powder tool, inking up this large snowflake once again with the white pigment ink, and then sprinkling on that white embossing powder, making sure to give it a really good flick to get all that excess off. And then once again, making sure your heat tool is really nice and hot. And I'm really going back and forth because I'm trying to minimize the warping as much as possible. Now I'm taking that regular circle die from the circle shaker set and I'm die cutting this out. And then off screen, I went ahead and die cut out a bunch of those stitched circles. So this is our circle shaker portion. I placed one on top of my snowflake that is on acetate. And then here I die cut out a bunch of them and I'm layering them together with some liquid glue. Now, every now and then I'll pop them over under some heavy blocks just to make sure they're stuck together really well. But what I'm doing is building up my shaker window. So this is where we're actually going to put our sequence or whatever mix you want to put in as your shaker element. Now that is kind of a surefire way to make sure no sequence is going to slip out. With foam tape, sometimes if we don't line it up right, sequence or whatever you're using can slip through. So by doing it this way and building those layers up really is kind of foolproof when it comes to shaker cards. It's just a little bit more time consuming because you have so many layers to die cut out. So I added some shaker bits to the center of that stripped panel and then added the liquid glue onto the back of my window and attached that. The sentiment I'm using is just a sentiment I heat embossed in white onto black cardstock, trimmed down to a thin strip and added to the center with some foam squares. This sentiment is found on that Blizzard stamp set. So that is my second shaker card. I really love this one. I just love that beautiful large snowflake and the colorful strips in the back. And even though you can see I have a little bit of fuzzies around my heat embossing, I think that just really adds into the snowflake portion of it. So on to my third shaker. Here I went ahead and die cut strips again. This time I'm only using a few colors and I have a piece of white cardstock that I had done that Snowflakes embossing folder with. So I'm just adding these strips to the front of that cardstock and this one is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm just going to continue building this up. This one also kind of changed course as I was working on it. So I had a few different ideas with it. But after I build up those layers, I'm going to trim this down to about 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I'm adding foam tape to the back of it and adding it to a panel of white cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Now you're going to notice that afterwards I have more strips of cardstock, and that's because this is where my plans had kind of changed. Now with the shaker cards, you don't have to heat emboss on top of acetate. You can just use some regular acetate as a window. So that's what I did here is I once again layered up that stitched circle window and I placed the acetate in there. And now this is a little gnome from the other stamp set included in the kit that I had stamped and colored, and I attached it to the front of that acetate with a tape runner, so you don't have to emboss if you don't want to. You can just glue images on top. So I added bits of shaker mix and sequins to the center onto my card panel, added the liquid glue behind my shaker window, and then attached that over that sequence mix. You just want to make sure that that sequence mix is not built up in a pile. You want to kind of spread it out or your shaker window won't go down right. Now these are just some sentiments that I trimmed down that Gina has. They're pre-printed sentiments, and I'm adding that down at the bottom there with some black foam squares. So that is 3 different ideas for you using the kit and these circle shaker windows. Now just keep in mind the circle shaker window dies are not included in the kit. Those are sold separately. I just couldn't resist using them on my card today, and I thought they would be absolutely perfect to use with the Snowflake stamp set. There are definitely more products to take a look at from the Gina K Designs release. I'm going to have my supplies listed down below in the video description, but be sure to head over and check out the rest of the release. I'm going to have more inspiration coming to you very soon.